Marcus Wellington straightened his silk tie one final time before stepping out of his black Mercedes in the underground parking garage. At 38, he commanded respect wherever he went, running one of the city's most successful tech companies with an iron fist and sharp business mind. His tailored suit cost more than most people earned in a month, and his confidence radiated from every carefully measured step as he walked toward the elevator. The morning had already started poorly. His personal assistant had called in sick. His usual coffee shop was closed for renovations, and traffic had made him 15 minutes late for his first meeting. Marcus prided himself on punctuality and perfection, so these minor disruptions felt like major failures in his meticulously planned world. As the elevator doors opened on the 15th floor, Marcus rushed toward his corner office, phone pressed to his ear, as he barked instructions to his marketing director about the upcoming product launch. His mind raced through the day's agenda: 3 board meetings, a conference call with investors from Tokyo, and a presentation that could make or break their biggest deal of the year. The hallways of Wellington Tech buzzed with activity as employees scurried between meetings, their conversations a mixture of technical jargon and deadline anxiety. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a stunning view of the city skyline, while modern art pieces and motivational quotes decorated the pristine white walls. Everything about the office screamed success and ambition. Marcus barely noticed the yellow, wet floor sign as he rounded the corner near the break room. His attention was completely absorbed by the conversation with his marketing team about projected quarterly revenues. The janitor, a slight man in his 60s wearing a faded blue uniform, was methodically mopping the marble floors with careful, practiced movements. Roberto Hernandez had been cleaning these same floors for nearly 8 years. He arrived at 5 in the morning every day, long before the executives and their expensive shoes would click across the surfaces he polished to perfection. Most employees barely acknowledged his presence, treating him like part of the building's infrastructure, rather than a human being with his own story and struggles. The collision happened in slow motion. Marcus, gesturing wildly with his free hand while demanding answers about marketing budgets, stepped directly into Roberto's path just as the janitor was wringing out his mop. The impact sent Marcus's briefcase flying, papers scattering like confetti across the wet floor, while his phone skittered under a nearby desk. But the real disaster was the coffee. Marcus had been carrying a large cup of steaming hot espresso, his emergency caffeine fix from the lobby vending machine. The impact launched the dark liquid in a perfect arc, covering both men in the sticky, aromatic mess. Marcus's pristine, white shirt and $1,000 suit were instantly ruined, while Roberto stood frozen, coffee dripping from his weathered face and gray hair. For a moment, the busy hallway fell silent. Employees stopped their conversations and stared at the scene, some pulling out phones to capture what would undoubtedly become office legend. The great Marcus Wellington, brought low by a simple cup of coffee and an invisible janitor. Marcus felt his face burn with embarrassment and rage. His first instinct was to unleash the full force of his anger on this careless employee who had just destroyed his morning and his dignity. He opened his mouth to deliver the kind of verbal assault that had made grown executives cower in boardrooms, the kind that would ensure this janitor was unemployed before lunch. But something in Roberto's eyes stopped him cold. Instead of the fear or defensiveness Marcus expected, he saw genuine concern and immediate remorse. The older man was already reaching for towels from his cart, his movements quick but gentle as he tried to help clean the mess from Marcus's expensive clothing. "I am so sorry, sir," Roberto said in heavily accented English, his voice trembling with worry. "Please let me help you. I have clean towels and I know how to get coffee stains out. My wife, she teaches me these things." The sincerity in Roberto's voice caught Marcus off guard. Here was a man who made minimum wage, who could lose his job for this accident, and his first concern was helping the person he had inconvenienced. It was so different from Marcus's world, where every interaction was calculated and every relationship was transactional. As Roberto continued apologizing and dabbing at the coffee stains with remarkable skill, Marcus found himself really looking at the janitor for the first time. He noticed the careful way Roberto handled the expensive fabric, the genuine distress in his weathered features, and the pride he took in trying to fix what had gone wrong. This wasn't just some careless employee. This was a man who cared deeply about doing his job well, even when no one was watching. The anger that had been building in Marcus's chest slowly began to deflate, replaced by something he hadn't felt in years: curiosity about another person's story. As other employees began to drift away, returning to their important meetings and urgent deadlines, Marcus made a decision that would surprise everyone, including himself. Instead of storming off to change clothes and fire the janitor, Marcus found himself saying, "It's all right, accidents happen." The words felt foreign in his mouth, like speaking a language he had once known but had forgotten how to use. Roberto's hand shook slightly as he continued working on the coffee stains, his decades of experience with cleaning showing in every careful movement. Marcus watched, fascinated despite himself, as the janitor produced a small spray bottle from his cart and began treating the fabric with the precision of a skilled craftsman. "This solution, it works very good on coffee," Roberto explained, his broken English carrying a warmth that Marcus rarely heard in his daily interactions. "My Maria, she makes it from white vinegar and special soap. She cleans houses for rich families and they always spill things on expensive clothes." Marcus felt a strange sensation, like being pulled into a conversation he had never expected to have. His phone was still buzzing under the desk where it had landed, probably his assistant calling about the rescheduled meetings. But for the first time in years, Marcus found himself ignoring the demands of his schedule. "You've been doing this for a long time," Marcus observed, noting the methodical way Roberto arranged his cleaning supplies and the obvious pride he took in his work. "8 years here, but I clean for 30 years total," Roberto replied, a hint of pride creeping into his voice despite his obvious nervousness about speaking to the big boss. "Before this, I work in hotels, restaurants, hospitals, always cleaning, always making things nice for other people." As Roberto continued his work, Marcus became aware of details he had never noticed before. The janitor's uniform was old, but meticulously clean and pressed. His shoes were worn, but polished. Everything about Roberto spoke of dignity maintained, despite difficult circumstances of taking pride in work that others might consider beneath them. "I have 3 children," Roberto continued, perhaps feeling the need to fill the unusual silence with conversation. "My oldest, she just started college. First in our family to go to university. She wants to be a teacher." His weathered face lit up with unmistakable pride as he spoke about his daughter. Marcus felt something shift inside his chest. He thought about his own daughter, currently attending an expensive private school across the country, her tuition alone more than Roberto probably made in a year. When was the last time Marcus had felt the kind of pure pride he was witnessing now? "That's wonderful," Marcus said, surprising himself with the genuine warmth in his voice. "What's she studying?" Roberto's face brightened even more. "Elementary education. She loves children, always helping her little brother and sister with homework. She says she wants to help kids from families like ours, kids who maybe don't have lots of advantages but have big dreams." The simple beauty of Roberto's words hit Marcus unexpectedly hard. Here was a man who cleaned floors for a living, whose daughter was working toward a career helping others, while Marcus's own daughter was majoring in business with the sole goal of making as much money as possible as quickly as possible. By now, the coffee stains were barely visible on Marcus's shirt, and Roberto was carefully blotting the suit jacket with a clean cloth. Other employees continued to walk past, some stealing glances at the unusual scene of their CEO having an actual conversation with the janitor, but most were too absorbed in their own urgent matters to pay much attention. "There," Roberto said, finally, stepping back to survey his work. "Is much better now. The suit, it might need professional cleaning, but the shirt should be okay for your meetings today." Marcus looked down at his clothes, amazed at the transformation. The coffee stains had virtually disappeared, and somehow Roberto had even managed to smooth out most of the wrinkles. It was the kind of attention to detail and care that Marcus rarely encountered, even from people who were paid far more than the janitor's modest salary. "This is incredible work," Marcus said, genuinely impressed. "Where did you learn to do this?" Roberto shrugged modestly. "When you have little money, you learn to fix things instead of throwing them away. My Maria, she teaches me many tricks for taking care of nice things. We cannot afford to replace, so we must repair." The phrase stuck with Marcus. Repair instead of replace. In his world, everything was disposable. Employees who didn't perform were fired and replaced. Equipment that showed signs of wear was discarded for newer models. Even relationships seemed to follow the same pattern. When things got difficult, it was easier to move on than to invest the effort required to fix what was broken. As Roberto began packing up his cleaning supplies, Marcus realized he didn't want this strange, enlightening conversation to end. For the first time in months, maybe years, he was talking to someone who wasn't trying to sell him something, impress him, or get something from him. Roberto was simply being himself, sharing his story with honest humility. "I should let you get back to work," Marcus said, but his tone suggested he was hoping for a reason to continue the conversation. Roberto nodded and started to push his cart toward the next area that needed cleaning. But then he stopped and turned back to Marcus with a shy smile. "Mr. Wellington, if you ever need anything cleaned, just ask Roberto. I take good care of things that matter." As the janitor disappeared around the corner, Marcus stood alone in the hallway, staring at his reflection in the polished floor. Something fundamental had shifted in those few minutes, though he couldn't yet name what it was. For the first time in years, Marcus felt genuinely curious about someone else's life, genuinely moved by someone else's story. His phone was still buzzing insistently under the desk, and he knew a dozen people were probably wondering where he was. But Marcus found himself reluctant to return to his usual routine of meetings and power plays and strategic decisions. Instead, he found himself thinking about Roberto's daughter, starting college with dreams of helping children, and wondering what dreams he himself had abandoned along the way to building his empire. The rest of Marcus's day unfolded differently than usual. During his board meeting, instead of commanding the room with his typical aggressive confidence, he found himself listening more carefully to what others were saying. When his marketing director presented the quarterly projections, Marcus noticed the young man's nervousness and chose encouragement over his usual harsh criticism. But Roberto remained on his mind. During lunch, as Marcus sat in the executive dining room picking at his expensive salad, he couldn't stop thinking about the janitor's pride when talking about his daughter. Marcus tried to remember the last time he had spoken about his own daughter with such genuine warmth, and the realization troubled him. That evening, Marcus decided to stay late at the office, something he often did but for different reasons tonight. Instead of burying himself in spreadsheets and strategic plans, he found himself walking the halls after most employees had left. He was looking for Roberto, though he wasn't entirely sure why. He found the janitor in the break room, methodically, cleaning the refrigerator while humming a soft Spanish song. Roberto looked up in surprise when Marcus appeared in the doorway, clearly not expecting to encounter the CEO at this hour. "Mr. Wellington," Roberto said, quickly setting down his cleaning cloth. "Is there something you need? Did the stains come back?" Marcus smiled, a real smile that felt rusty from disuse. "No, the stains are fine. Your wife's solution worked perfectly. I was just curious about something you mentioned earlier. Your daughter in college." Roberto's face lit up instantly. "Sophia. Yes, she is doing very well. Just finished her first week of classes. She calls every night to tell us about her professors and new friends." He pulled out his phone, an old model with a cracked screen, and showed Marcus a photo of a beautiful young woman in a graduation cap, beaming with joy. "She's lovely," Marcus said, and meant it. "You must be incredibly proud." "Every day," Roberto nodded enthusiastically. "But also scared, you know. The money for school, it is very difficult. We save for many years and Sophia works part-time job, but still there is not enough. Each semester we worry maybe we cannot continue." Marcus felt his heart sink. He thought about his own daughter's college fund, so substantial that she would never have to work or worry about money for anything. The contrast between the two families felt overwhelming. "How much does she need?" Marcus asked before he could stop himself. Roberto looked uncomfortable. "Oh, Mr. Wellington, I do not tell you this to ask for money. I just share because you seem interested in knowing about people who work here. Sophia is smart and strong. She will find a way." But Marcus was already thinking. His company's charitable foundation donated thousands of dollars to various causes every year. most of them chosen more for tax benefits than genuine concern. Yet here was a deserving young woman whose dreams might be crushed simply by lack of funds while her father worked tirelessly to keep their office building spotless. What if there was a way? Marcus pressed gently. What if the company had a scholarship program for children of employees? Roberto's eyes widened. That would be a miracle. But Mr. Wellington, you do not have to do this because I spilled coffee on you. Marcus laughed, surprising both of them. Roberto, you didn't spill coffee on me. I ran into you while I wasn't paying attention to where I was going. And this isn't about the coffee. This is about recognizing value where it exists. Over the next hour, Marcus found himself having the most genuine conversation he'd had in years. Roberto told him about his journey to America 25 years ago, arriving with nothing but hope and determination. He spoke about his wife Maria's struggle to learn English while working multiple cleaning jobs. He described the challenges of raising 3 children while working night shifts and weekends, always worried about money but never losing sight of their dreams. In return, Marcus found himself sharing things he rarely discussed with anyone. He talked about the loneliness of success, the pressure of constantly making decisions that affected hundreds of employees' lives, and his growing sense that somewhere along the way, he had lost touch with the person he used to be. When I first started this company, Marcus admitted, I wanted to create something that would help people, that would make a difference in the world. Somehow it became just about money and market share and beating the competition. Roberto listened with the kind of attention that Marcus rarely received, even from his highest-paid consultants. When Marcus finished speaking, Roberto was quiet for a moment, then said, Maybe it's not too late to remember those first dreams, no? Maybe success can be about helping people again. The simple wisdom in Roberto's words resonated deeply with Marcus. Here was a man who had never been to business school, never read leadership books or attended management seminars. Yet he understood something fundamental that Marcus had forgotten. Work could be about more than just profit. As they talked, Marcus learned that Roberto knew every employee in the building by name. He knew who was struggling with personal problems, who was celebrating milestones, who stayed late because they were dedicated, and who stayed late because they were avoiding problems at home. Roberto saw everything and cared about everyone, despite being largely invisible to most of the people he served. You know this company better than I do, Marcus realized aloud. Roberto smiled modestly. I just pay attention. When you clean around people every day, you learn their habits, their moods. You see when they are happy or sad or stressed. Most people, they do not notice the janitor, so they act natural around me. Marcus felt a profound shift in his understanding. He had been running his company from the top floor, making decisions based on reports and data and quarterly projections. But Roberto was operating from ground level, with real human insight that no spreadsheet could capture. That night, as Marcus finally headed home to his empty penthouse apartment, he carried with him a new perspective on his business and his life. The coffee mishap had led to something far more valuable than a cleaned suit. It had opened his eyes to possibilities he hadn't considered in years. The next morning, Marcus arrived at work with a different energy. Instead of rushing straight to his corner office, he took time to actually look around as he walked through the building. He noticed things that had been invisible to him before. The careful way Roberto had arranged the lobby plants, the spotless condition of areas that most people never even thought about, the subtle signs of someone who took genuine pride in their work. Marcus's first stop was human resources, where he surprised Director Jennifer Walsh by asking about employee benefits and family support programs. Jennifer, an efficient woman in her 40s who had worked for the company for 6 years, pulled up files on her computer while trying to hide her confusion about this sudden interest. We have health insurance and a retirement plan, she explained, scrolling through documents. Paid vacation days based on years of service, the standard package for most companies our size. What about education support? Scholarships for employees' children? Marcus asked. Jennifer looked puzzled. We've never had anything like that. Is this for a specific situation, or are you thinking about implementing a new program? Marcus thought about Sophia, working part-time while trying to afford college, and about Roberto's quiet worry about each semester's expenses. I'm thinking about a new program. What would it take to set up scholarships for children of all our employees, not just executives? Jennifer's eyebrows rose. That would be unusual. Most companies limit educational benefits to management-level positions. The cost could be substantial if we include maintenance and support staff. The cost of doing what's right usually is substantial, Marcus replied. Put together a proposal. I want to see numbers for covering tuition assistance for any employee's child who maintains good grades and demonstrates financial need. After Jennifer left to work on the proposal, Marcus made another unusual decision. He asked his assistant to set up meetings with department heads, but not for the typical strategic planning sessions. Instead, he wanted to discuss employee satisfaction and workplace culture. The first meeting was with David Kim, the head of information technology. David was a brilliant programmer who had helped build the company's core systems, but Marcus realized he knew very little about David as a person. I want your honest opinion, Marcus began, leaning back in his chair. How do our people really feel about working here? Not the official surveys, but what do you hear in the break rooms and informal conversations? David seemed surprised by the question. Well, honestly, people are grateful for the jobs, especially in this economy. But there's not much connection, I guess. Everyone works hard, but it feels like we're all just individual contributors rather than part of something bigger. What would make it feel bigger? Marcus asked. David considered this carefully. I think people want to know that their work matters beyond just company profits, and they want to feel like leadership actually sees them as people, not just resources. That afternoon, Marcus found himself walking through the building again, this time deliberately stopping to talk with employees at various levels. He spoke with Sarah in accounting, who had been quietly struggling since her husband lost his job 6 months ago. He chatted with Miguel in shipping, who had innovative ideas about improving their logistics but had never felt comfortable sharing them with management. Each conversation revealed layers of human complexity that Marcus had never bothered to discover. These weren't just employees performing functions. They were people with dreams, challenges, insights, and potential that was being wasted because no one had ever bothered to ask. That evening, Marcus again found Roberto cleaning the executive floors. This time their conversation came naturally, as if they were old friends catching up after a long day. I've been thinking about our talk yesterday, Marcus said, helping Roberto arrange chairs around a conference table, about paying attention to people. I realized I've been running this company like a machine instead of a community. Roberto paused in his work. Community is important. When people feel connected to each other and to something bigger than themselves, they work with their hearts, not just their hands. How do you build that kind of community? Marcus asked. Roberto smiled. You start by seeing people, really seeing them. When someone is having a bad day, you notice. When someone does good work, you acknowledge it. When someone has ideas, you listen. Small things, but they add up to big changes. Marcus nodded, thinking about his conversations throughout the day. I've been meeting with people today, really talking to them for the first time. You're right. There's so much potential being wasted because we're not connected as a team. Sophia called tonight, Roberto said, his face brightening. She met with a counselor about financial aid, and they told her about work-study programs. She is hopeful, but still worried. I told her that worry is part of caring about something important. Marcus felt a surge of determination. Roberto, what if I told you that by next week, Sophia wouldn't have to worry about tuition anymore? What if I told you that every employee in this company would have access to educational support for their families? Roberto stopped cleaning and stared at Marcus. You are serious about this scholarship idea? Completely serious. I spent all morning working with HR on a proposal. We're going to create a fund that covers tuition, books, and living expenses for any employee's child who wants to pursue education. Sophia will be our first recipient. Roberto's eyes filled with tears. Mr. Wellington, this is too much. I cannot accept such generosity. This isn't charity, Roberto, this is investment. I'm investing in the future of our community, and Sophia represents the best of what that future could be. Besides, you've taught me more about leadership in 2 days than I learned in 20 years of running this company." The two men stood in the gleaming conference room surrounded by the trappings of corporate success, yet engaged in a conversation that was fundamentally about human dignity and potential. Marcus realized that this moment, standing in his own building, talking with the janitor about dreams and community, was more satisfying than any board meeting or profit report he had ever experienced. "There's something else I want to discuss with you," Marcus continued. "I've been thinking about creating a new position in the company, someone who understands our people, who pays attention to the human side of our business, someone who could help bridge the gap between management and staff." Roberto looked confused. "What kind of position?" Marcus smiled. "Employee relations specialist, someone who makes sure that everyone in this building feels valued and heard, someone who helps leadership understand what our people really need to do their best work. I can't think of anyone more qualified than you." Roberto's mouth fell open. "But Mr. Wellington, I am just a janitor. I do not have college education or business training." "Roberto, you have something more valuable than any business degree. You have wisdom, compassion, and a genuine understanding of what makes people tick. Those aren't things you can learn in school. They're things you develop by paying attention and caring about others." As Marcus walked home that night, he felt a lightness he hadn't experienced in years. The conversation with Roberto had sparked something that felt like a return to his original vision for the company. Not just a profitable business, but a place where people could grow, contribute, and find meaning in their work. 3 weeks later, Marcus stood before the entire company at their quarterly meeting. But this time, the atmosphere was different. Instead of the usual formal presentation about numbers and projections, he had arranged for the gathering to take place in the main lobby with all employees, from executives to maintenance staff, seated together as equals. Roberto sat in the front row, wearing a new shirt that Maria had insisted on buying for this special occasion. Next to him sat Sophia, who had driven down from college to witness her father's recognition. Her eyes sparkled with pride and amazement at the transformation that had occurred in both their lives. 3 weeks ago, Marcus began, his voice carrying a warmth that employees had rarely heard before. "I had what I initially thought was an unfortunate accident. I collided with our colleague Roberto Hernandez, spilling coffee everywhere and ruining what I thought was the most important thing about my day, my schedule." A ripple of laughter moved through the crowd. Many people had heard about the famous coffee incident, though few knew the full story of what had followed. What I discovered in that moment and in the days that followed was that the accident wasn't unfortunate at all. It was exactly what I needed to remember what really matters in business and in life. Marcus looked directly at Roberto as he spoke. "Roberto taught me that success isn't just about profit margins and market share. It's about recognizing the value in every person who contributes to our shared mission." Marcus gestured to a large screen behind him, which displayed the new company initiatives that had been developed over the past 3 weeks. "Today, I'm announcing several changes that will help us become the kind of company we always had the potential to be." The first announcement was the Wellington Family Education Fund, which would provide full scholarships for employees' children pursuing higher education. Sophia would be the inaugural recipient, with her tuition, books, and living expenses covered through graduation. But the changes went far beyond financial support. Marcus had worked with department heads to implement flexible working arrangements, recognize outstanding contributions from all levels of staff, and create channels for every employee to share ideas and feedback with leadership. "We're also creating a new position," Marcus continued. "Employee relations specialist designed to ensure that every person in this company feels valued and heard. Our first employee relations specialist will be Roberto Hernandez." The applause was thunderous. Roberto stood slowly, overwhelmed by the recognition and the trust being placed in him. In 3 weeks, he had gone from invisible janitor to a valued voice in company leadership, not because of his resume or connections, but because of his genuine understanding of human nature. After the formal presentations, Marcus mingled with employees in a way he had never done before. He asked about families, listened to suggestions, and showed genuine interest in the people who made his company successful. The change in culture was already visible. People were more engaged, more willing to contribute ideas, and more invested in collective success. Sarah from accounting approached Marcus during the reception, her eyes bright with gratitude. "Mr. Wellington, I don't know what inspired this transformation, but I want you to know that for the first time in months I actually look forward to coming to work. When you announced the Emergency Assistance Fund for employees facing financial hardship, I almost cried. My family has been struggling since my husband lost his job, and knowing that support is available has lifted such a weight from my shoulders." David. Kim, the IT director, had similar feedback. "The idea-sharing platform you've implemented is brilliant. In just 3 weeks, we've received over 50 suggestions from employees at all levels. Some of them are genuinely innovative solutions that management never would have thought of." But perhaps the most meaningful moment came when Marcus's own daughter called during the reception. Emma, home from college for a brief visit, had heard about the changes at her father's company through social media posts from employees. "Dad, I saw the photos from your company meeting today. Everyone looks so happy. And that story about the janitor who's getting promoted, it's all over social media in a good way. People are calling your company an example of how business should be done." Emma paused. "I'm proud of you. This is the father I remember from when I was little, before everything became about money and competition." Marcus felt tears in his eyes as he listened to his daughter's words. The success he had been chasing for years, respect, recognition, fulfillment, had finally arrived, but not through the methods he had expected. Later that evening, as the building returned to its usual quiet, Marcus found Roberto in his new office, a small but well-appointed space near human resources, where he would coordinate his new responsibilities. Roberto was carefully arranging family photos on his desk, including the graduation picture of Sophia that Marcus remembered from their first real conversation. "How does it feel?" Marcus asked, settling into a chair across from Roberto's desk. Roberto looked up with a smile that conveyed more than words could express, like a dream but also like something I have been preparing for my whole life without knowing it. All those years of watching people, listening to their concerns, seeing what they needed, now I can actually do something to help. "You've been helping all along," Marcus replied. "You just didn't have the official title or the platform. Now you do." Roberto nodded thoughtfully. "Sophia called me tonight. She is so excited about school now, knowing that money will not force her to quit. But more than that, she said she is proud that her father is showing other companies how to treat their workers with dignity." "Your daughter is wise," Marcus said. "She understands that this is bigger than just our company. We're proving that business can be profitable and compassionate at the same time." As Marcus prepared to leave, Roberto stopped him with a question. "Mr. Wellington, may I ask you something personal?" "Of course. That morning when we collided, you had every right to be angry with me. You could have fired me and forgotten about it within an hour. What made you choose differently?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "I think I was ready for change but didn't know how to make it happen. When I saw the dignity you maintained even in that embarrassing moment, when I heard the pride in your voice talking about Sophia, I realized I had forgotten what real values looked like. You reminded me of the person I used to be, and the person I wanted to become again." Roberto smiled. Then maybe that coffee spill was not an accident. After all, maybe it was exactly what both of us needed at exactly the right time. As Marcus walked through the building toward the exit, he noticed Roberto's careful touches everywhere. The perfect arrangement of furniture, the spotless surfaces, the small details that created an environment where people could do their best work. But now he also saw something else. The foundation for a community where every person's contribution was valued and every person's potential could be realized. 6 months after the coffee incident that changed everything, Marcus stood in the same hallway where it had all began. But the space felt completely transformed. The walls now displayed photos and achievements of employees at every level, creating a gallery of human stories rather than just corporate milestones. A bulletin board near the break room featured updates on scholarship recipients, employee volunteer projects, and community initiatives that the company now actively supported. Roberto's influence was visible throughout the building. His new role as employee relations specialist had evolved into something even more meaningful than Marcus had originally envisioned. Roberto had become the bridge between all levels of the organization, facilitating conversations that had never happened before and identifying opportunities for improvement that management would never have discovered on their own. The changes had attracted attention far beyond their company. Business journals were writing articles about Wellington Tech's innovative approach to employee relations. Universities were inviting Marcus to speak about leadership transformation. Most importantly, their company culture had become a recruitment advantage, attracting top talent who wanted to work for an organization that valued human dignity alongside professional achievement. Marcus was reviewing the quarterly reports when Roberto knocked on his office door. Even with his elevated position, Roberto maintained the respectful courtesy that had always characterized his interactions, though now their relationship had deepened into genuine friendship. "Mr. Wellington, I have the employee satisfaction survey results," Roberto said, settling into the chair that Marcus now kept specifically for their regular meetings. "The numbers are extraordinary, but I think the written comments tell the real story." Marcus looked over the data, amazed at the transformation. Employee satisfaction had increased by 40%, productivity was up significantly, and turnover had dropped to nearly zero. But as Roberto had suggested, the written comments revealed the human impact of their cultural revolution. "Listen to this," Marcus said, reading from the survey responses. Sarah from accounting wrote, "For the first time in my career, I feel like my employer sees me as a whole person, not just a job function. When my family faced financial crisis, the company's emergency assistance fund provided practical help, but more importantly, it showed that my colleagues genuinely cared about my well-being." Roberto smiled. "And here is one from David in IT. The idea-sharing platform has transformed how we solve problems. Last week, a suggestion from maintenance led to a software improvement that will save the company thousands of dollars annually. Now every employee knows their insights are valuable regardless of their job title." But the most meaningful feedback came from newer employees who had joined the company specifically because of its reputation for treating people well. The culture that Marcus and Roberto had built together was becoming self-reinforcing, attracting people who shared their values and strengthening the foundation they had created. "There's something else," Roberto said, his voice carrying a special warmth. "Sophia graduates next month and she has been accepted to a master's program in educational leadership. But more than that, she wants to start her teaching career in underserved communities, helping children whose families face the same challenges we did." Marcus felt the familiar surge of pride he had learned to associate with Sophia's achievements. Over the past months, he had watched her flourish not just academically, but as a young woman determined to use her education to lift others up. Her success represented everything their company transformation had been about: recognizing potential, providing opportunity, and trusting people to exceed expectations. "She's going to change lives," Marcus said, "just like her father has changed our company." Roberto shook his head modestly. "We changed each other, I think, and now we are changing how business can be done." That afternoon brought an unexpected visitor. Emma, Marcus's daughter, had driven up from her university to surprise her father. She found him in Roberto's office where the two men were reviewing proposals for expanding their scholarship program to include trade schools and professional certification programs. "Dad," Emma said, appearing in the doorway with a bright smile, "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." Marcus jumped up to embrace his daughter, genuinely thrilled to see her. Over the past months, their relationship had transformed as dramatically as his company culture. Emma had watched her father rediscover his humanity and had responded by opening up about her own dreams and concerns in ways she hadn't since childhood. "Emma, you remember Roberto?" Marcus said, gesturing to his colleague who had stood to greet her respectfully. "Of course," Emma replied warmly. "Roberto, I've heard so much about you and Sophia. Dad talks about your family constantly. He's so proud of Sophia's success." Roberto beamed. She is doing very well thanks to the opportunity your father created. But I think maybe your father has learned as much from our friendship as we have from his generosity." Emma looked between the two men and smiled. "I can see that. Dad, you look happier than you have in years. And I've been reading about the company online, the business articles, the employee testimonials, even the social media posts. You've built something really special here." "We've built something special," Marcus corrected. "Roberto taught me that leadership isn't about commanding from the top. It's about creating an environment where everyone can contribute their best." As they talked, other employees stopped by Roberto's office with various questions and updates. Marcus watched with amazement as Roberto handled each interaction with patience and wisdom, helping solve problems ranging from scheduling conflicts to personal challenges. The janitor, who had once been invisible to most people, had become the heart of their company's human infrastructure. That evening, as the three of them prepared to leave the building together, Marcus reflected on the incredible journey that had begun with a simple coffee spill. The accident that had initially seemed like a minor embarrassment had evolved into a complete transformation of his understanding of success, leadership, and human potential. "Roberto," Marcus said as they reached the parking garage, "I have a confession to make. That morning 6 months ago when we collided, I was rushing to a meeting that I thought was the most important thing in my day. I was so focused on making more money and beating the competition that I had forgotten why I started this company in the first place." Roberto nodded thoughtfully. "And now?" Marcus looked around the building that housed not just a business but a community of people who cared about each other's success. "Now I remember that the most important meetings aren't scheduled in conference rooms. They happen in hallways over coffee, in moments when we actually pay attention to the people around us." Emma squeezed her father's arm. "I'm proud of you, Dad. This is the kind of leader I always hoped you would become." As Marcus drove home that night, he passed by Roberto's modest house in a working-class neighborhood across town. Through the window he could see the warm light of the family gathered around their dinner table, probably discussing Sophia's upcoming graduation and the bright future that lay ahead of all of them. The coffee mishap that had once seemed like a disaster had revealed itself to be the most fortunate accident of Marcus's life. It had cost him a designer's suit but had given him back his humanity. It had interrupted his schedule but had taught him about priorities that really mattered. Most importantly, it had introduced him to a man whose wisdom and character had transformed not just a company, but an entire community of people who now understood that success could be measured in human dignity as well as financial profit. Marcus smiled as he pulled into his driveway, already looking forward to tomorrow's conversations with the remarkable people who had taught him that the best business decisions are usually the most human ones.